Welkom terug weer iedereen. Onze volgende gast die komt all the way vanuit Zweden onze kant op. En ik denk dat er weinig mensen zijn die zoveel geluk hebben dat ze geboren worden in een gezin waarbij de ouders een telpost runnen. Ik denk dat er nog minder mensen zijn die het geluk hebben dat die telpost dan ook Falsterbo heet. En inmiddels heeft hij dan ook 20 jaar ervaring als teller op deze post. En wij belden van de week even om te vragen van, joh, waar ga je het nou allemaal over hebben? Wat is het onderwerp? Vroeg ik ook even wat hij zo mooi vond aan deze discipline. En toen zei hij op een gegeven moment, I can always get better about identification. It simply never ends. Nou, vandaag heeft hij 40 minuten. En in die 40 minuten gaat hij ons uitleggen hoe je tussen alle aantallen aan gewone soorten nou echt een ene zeldzaamheid eruit weet te pikken. Zijn doelsoort, en dat vond ik heel leuk, zijn doelsoort is citroensijs. Dus ik denk dat wij alvast even kunnen nadenken over waar we de lat gaan leggen voor onszelf op de telpost. Maar nu eerst, how we detect the rare ones and some sound discipline. Mag ik een hartelijk applaus voor Måns.
Thank you, Peter, and thank you everybody for showing up and listening to my talk. It's an absolute pleasure to be here and to talk about the thing I love the most in the whole world, which is bird watching in Falsterbo. As Peter introduced, I will talk about how we find the rare birds in the millions of birds that pass over Falsterbo in the autumn migration every year. It won't be completely focused on migration, it will be a little bit more general than that. But I will talk about the tactics of finding them and not about the specific identification of any species, but rather how do we know which bird to check whether it is a rare one. I call it finding the megas in the masses, and let's get right into it. What I will go through here is I will give a short introduction and background of myself. How did I end up here? And I will give an introduction to the migration counting point and admittedly one of the most famous migration spots in the world, which is Nabben in Falsterbo. Then I will talk about the general tactics that we employ to find the rare birds, and then we will do deep dives in 4 different groups of species, which you can see listed here on the screen. And then we'll round it all off and open the floor for any questions regarding this. So, who am I? Well, I was so lucky that I was born at the Falsterbo Bird Observatory. My parents, they spent their whole lives developing and running this bird observatory. If you are interested in that type of life artistry, that you could call it, I suggest you go watch the documentary The Last Observers on YouTube, which is directed by my sister, sponsored by Patagonia, and has basically gone viral over the past year. So I suggest you take a look at that. There will be a link in the end. I have a background in mathematical statistics. That's my other big passion. I did a PhD at Stockholm University where I developed data analysis methods and applied them to bird data. Yeah, that's not what this talk is going to be about, don't worry. I worked with a Swedish birdwatching magazine called Roadrunner for 13 years. People call it the Vogue of birding, and I very much like that description, and that's exactly what we're trying to do. It's a lifestyle magazine for birdwatchers. I was in a TV show where you take a celebrity and a birdwatcher and you go birdwatching together. This is a Dutch concept, and in the Netherlands it was called In the Search of the Condor. That was a fantastic event, promoted birdwatching as a hobby in Sweden in a fantastic way. Millions of viewers, people picking up the interest thanks to this show. So great experience. I also want to mention that I'm a Swarovski advisor. So if I'm talking about how fantastic the BTX is to use for filming flying birds with your mobile phone, I'm a slight bit biased, but I really mean that it is fantastic to use for that purpose, as I hope I can show here. That's the scope I use when I'm birding and when I'm filming. On my daily work is to build a bird watching robot for a Danish company. Ultimately, I want to put that in Falsterbo and have it do a better job than I do, counting the migrating birds. But that is at least a decade away. And I have a little side hustle. I count migrating birds at Nabben in Falsterbo, at least part of the season. And that's why I'm here. The head counter, he had a schedule conflict, so he asked if I could come here and talk instead, which I, of course, could not say no to. So that is the current connection to Nabben. And the previous connection was that I grew up 700 meters from the spot. So I'm very intimately tied to this location. So let's dive into the actual place. What is Nabben, and what's the geography and the environment around here, and what's important to think about when you're birdwatching there? On this picture, you can see 4 people, and you would probably think that, okay, so he grew up next to Nabben and he's birded there his whole life, and now he's working as a migration counter. There's probably not many people who have spent more time than him there, but there actually are. Everybody in this picture has been birding more at Nabben than I have, which goes to show how much allure this place has on people and how committed you can get to birdwatching there because of the potential that the place has. On a global scale, we're located in the very south of Sweden. If we go a little bit closer, we see that we are at the very end of a peninsula in the southwest of Sweden. This is literally the end of Scandinavia before the continental Europe starts. I call Denmark continental Europe, and this is Scandinavia. So everything on the left side is Denmark. This is the Copenhagen area. Over here is Malmö. Down here is Germany, obviously, just to get your bearings on where we are. Zooming in on the peninsula, Nabben is, as I keep saying, the very end of Sweden. You can see the sand reefs of Måkläppen going out here. Those are off limits most of the year for seal and bird protection. And this little black dot where I have the laser, that is the Falsterbo Lighthouse. That is where I grew up. This area is Ljungen, famous birdwatching location for raptors. Over here is the Falsterbo Canal, where some people also decide to go for raptor watching. That's usually because they want to be the first to find them. I can understand that, but I am still a dogmatic promoter of Ljungen or Nabben as birdwatching locations if you want to watch raptors. Some stats for Nabben. We have 53 continuous years of daily counting from the 1st of August to the 20th of November. The bird migration phenomena in Sweden or in Falsterbo has been known for approximately 300 years, when Carl von Linné was in Falsterbo and noted that there was a considerable amount of raptors passing over here. Back in the day, you could go to the few trees that existed on the peninsula. These days it's more forested. And you could pluck honey buzzards out of the trees, kill them, salt them, put them in a barrel and sell them to the sailors and the traders that were passing by. So it's a crazy place. It has a long and storied history. And back in the glory days in the 12th and 13th and 14th century, when the herring was really a driver of business in this part of the world, 300,000 people aggregated in the Falsterbo Peninsula during the herring season. I would like to say that now 300,000 birders aggregate. Actually, I don't, because that would be a mess to find any birds if there were so many people. But these days, it's the birders that aggregate instead. We count between 1 and 4 million birds per year. We have noted from Nabben 336 species, of which 271 has been migrating. So basically that means they left the country at some point at Nabben. 88 species have migrated there every year during these 53 years. White-tailed eagle has not migrated every year. In the 70s, that was a rare bird. And there was 1 year when no white-tailed eagles were migrating. We lost one species last year, Lapland bunting. It had been there for every year, but last year we lost it. This number can only go down, unfortunately. So we hope that it stops here at 88 and that we keep all of these species for a long time going forward. The record for one day is 121 species from this particular 10 by 10 meter square that we're bird watching from. It's not the highest ever in Sweden, but we are working on it, and we are hoping to break the record within a couple of years. Let's move on to the general setup when you're bird watching at Nabben. So this is like, how do we approach it when we are doing the migration counting, and how should you approach it if you go there birding and you want to actually be efficient in the birding? For the migration counting, we always have at least 2 counters. They are financed by the Swedish Environmental Protection Agency, and it's their day job to do this during the season that I mentioned, August to November. These guys or girls cover 2 sectors, 1 sector each. This is roughly what the sectors look like. So same picture as before, we can see the whole peninsula. Nabben is down here. The orange sector is what we call the south side. And the blue sector is what, maybe that's a little bit hard to see, the blue here, I realize. It's called the west side. And you can notice that this overlap over land here, and that's basically because we both, as counters, need to look for approaching flocks of raptors or geese or anything really, and then see which side do they actually go on, and then you count it when they pass on each side, and you have a split of the species and how they're administered and everything. I won't go into too much details. The important thing here is to know that we have a sector division of the airspace to look in. This is the west side, so that was what was blue. This is the comfortable side. You have the sun in your back because you're looking towards the northwest. There's not too much obstruction. These bushes, it kind of looks worse than it is on this picture, but the shoreline is close. You have the sun in your back. There's usually not too many people on this side and nothing really obstructing your view. So this is where I, as the assistant counter, is looking. And on the south side, it's a little bit tougher because now you're looking into the sun every day. So all the colors, they just go out the window and you have to use silhouettes and flight gis and this kind of stuff to identify the birds. Makes it considerably harder. People tend to aggregate on this side of the counting, of the windbreak here. So there is a lot of people management involved. And the shoreline is considerably further away, meaning that you, as you realize, the birds are not as easy to see, or the details in the birds are not as easy to see. This is what it looks like in the windbreak. The west side counter is here. This is migration master Matthias. He is the head counter, and he is annoyed that I'm taking photographs instead of counting birds on this picture. We're also in this picture being inspected by our friend here from the Royal Academy of Science, checking, are you guys really doing a good job here? Or do we need to improve this in any way? We always have cameras ready. It's pretty much a given these days. I have my mobile phone, which I put on my BTX to film the birds. Matthias has his Canon camera with a 600mm objective or lens or something like that. They're always ready. Whenever we need them, within seconds, we can start documenting what pops up. We do not have continuous audio recording, unfortunately. And this has caused us to miss a number of good birds. Olive-backed pipit, I think there's been 4 or something where you hear them, you call them out. It sounds and seems to be an olive-backed pipit by all regards, but the Rarities Committee won't accept it because you don't get good enough documentation. You don't get an audio recording, you don't get any photos of it. Probably the right thing to not approve such records. And if we would have had continuous audio recording, we would have documented these birds. There are some other sides to continuously recording on a site where there's a lot of people talking. There's ethical regards to that. So we're hoping to find a setup next autumn where we do pre-record, meaning when we hit the record button, the last 30 seconds are saved. So that if you hear something, you listen for a while, then you hit record, it's all saved. That's our goal for next season. Another thing that's very important when you're birding at Nabben is to be in communication with what we call the vanguard. So you remember from the map, I showed you where Union and the canal and the lighthouse is. there is almost always birders at those locations when we are counting at Nabben, which means they often find the good birds before we do. And then we need to stay in contact with them. Well, often, it's not a majority of cases, but it happens regularly. So you need to stay in contact with your vanguards. It's also important to keep a clear field of view. Trivial. You might think, of course, we need to be able to see the birds, but it isn't trivial when there is 200 birders in the same little location. And they come in groups and they're new to the place and this kind of stuff. So in practice, what we need to do is go and tell people you can't stand there. And then most of the time they respect that and they're like, oh, sorry, I didn't know you were counting there, and we organize them in a systematic manner. So it works, but it requires some effort to go and move people around. What requires even more effort is to keep people quiet at this location. So obviously, you like to talk to your friends when you're out birding with them. And it's like, oh, wow, look at that flock of wagtails or something. And that's actually a problem when you're trying to pick out an ortolan bunting, or if you're trying to pick out little bunting, for example. You can't have all this noise going on. So we actually need to go and tell people to please stop talking, go over there and talk more quietly, these kind of things, more than we need to go and tell them to move somewhere else. And they usually respect that as well. They're like, oh, sorry, yeah, I know I shouldn't be, but it requires an effort. Another thing, and I can't emphasize the noise discipline enough here, is that the gravel on Nabben it must be the loudest gravel in the world. Because as soon as somebody takes a step, it's like a rocket launch goes off inside your head. And you're standing there and you're like there's like a constant barrage of tree-pipit calls. You're trying to pick out something good. And then somebody is like turning in the spot and you just hear this, and you're like, oh, there are birds that have been lost due to this. So last year, thanks to the warden of the Bird Observatory, Björn Malmhagen, we got some rubber mats and we started putting them out on the gravel here. And it made a huge difference. So now we don't need to tell people to stand still. We can tell them, please stand on this mat. Which is like a big step forward. So it might seem extreme, and I would argue that it is extreme, but I would also argue that it's very important if you actually want to maximize your chances of finding the good birds during the migration. Here's an example of how good the Nabben actually is. When all this clicks and you're there at the right time in the right weather, weather systems and everything, you can find a hell of a lot of good birds. So this is the list of birds that I found at Nabben last year. It's not everything that was found at Nabben. It's not everything I found in Falsterbo. It's just the birds that I found at Nabben last year. And yeah, this is not a bird, but I'll mention quickly the lesser scope. That was a refind for me, but a new bird for the Falsterbo, or a refind of a bird that was the first bird in Falsterbo. The wolf was the first record of wolf in 117 years in Falsterbo, and it just walked by on the beach at Nabben on Midsummer Day morning, when all of Sweden is passed out, terribly hangover from Midsummer's Eve celebrations the day before. And that caused such a stir that the whole next day I had to spend talking to media about the wolf and how it would run around in Falsterbo and cause ruckus with the local population. It actually ran by my house in the evening, but I had gone to bed by then. Short-tailed snake eagle, great bird to see in Sweden every time. Sooty shearwater, enormously good bird in Falsterbo, can go decades without seeing it. And glossy ibis, as you can see at the very bottom, still a good bird in Scandinavia. I know it's kind of lost its status in parts of Europe, but we don't get it every year at Nabben. So a great list of good finds, but probably just like, if you spend a lot of time at Nabben a year, this is what it would look like. That's the potential of the place. So let's get into the specific tactics and talk a little bit about, okay, you have a great raptor day. There is hundreds or maybe 1,000 honey buzzards, or there are several thousand common buzzards, thousands of sparrowhawks. How do you find the good birds? Well, let me go through the raptors in two groups. So first, we're going to talk about eagles, kites, and buzzards. And again, geography, super important. Union over here, the canal over here, the lighthouse quite close right over here. And we're out at Nabben. The raptors, they come from the inland, and depending on the wind, they will go either on the south or all over the place. Usually, they go over Union and then they continue down towards the southwest. Sometimes they go out like this, come in, and then go towards the southwest. And sometimes they go more towards the northwest. That's the worst situation for us at Nabben. Anyways, with these birds who are soaring birds during migration to the largest degree, we're quite often tipped off from Union. So we actually don't have to find these. We get them served on a silver platter because there's birders finding them at Union, calling us, telling us, we see it north of Union. Then we check the map and we're like, okay, so we need to watch in this direction. Oh, yeah, there it is. And it's not like you see, oh, it's a greater spotted eagle. You see, oh, there is an eagle in that group and it's not a white-tailed eagle. And they know that it's a greater spotted eagle at Union. It has to be the greater spotted eagle, more or less. That's the process. If we don't get tipped off, the gist is absolutely the key to finding these birds. As I just described, you see this other eagle with the kettle. That is quite often how we find the rare big raptors. You're scanning. You're standing at Nabben, you're scanning with your scope in towards the main area of the peninsula, and you find something in a thermal kettle which isn't a white-tailed eagle, and you're like, yeah, well, it is an eagle, but it's not a white-tailed eagle, so it's practically guarantees that it is a good eagle. There is no other regularly occurring eagle in Falsterbo than white-tailed eagle. So GIS is key. It's not uncommon that we find the birds before they find them at Union. So we spot it and then we call Union and say, we have a good eagle right above you. They look straight up and they're like, oh shit, yeah, sorry, my French. So GIS is key. That's how you find them. The biggest problem with finding these birds is during days with high thermals and blue skies. So the blue skies, you know, you just see this blue mass and your eyes or your brain, it just erases the black dots. It's near impossible to find them. Plus the high thermals make them fly at a kilometer's height or more. They're so far up that it's hard to detect them even with binoculars. That causes a problem for us. And those days we might find the bird straight up on the side. It might have already passed Nabben, as with the short-tailed snake eagle that I just mentioned. So we want medium thermals, please, if we're going to feel sure that we're not missing anything. So I'm going to show you an example of when we almost missed something. This is a greater spotted eagle. We found it literally right above our heads, quite early in the morning, around 9 or 9:30 or something like that in August. You will hear in the film it gets called out because we started filming it before we even had identified it as a greater spotted eagle. It's pretty obvious now when you look at it, but in the field you need to wait, what is this now? Oh.
Spotted eagle!
That's the head counter Matthias calling out the spotted eagle to everybody. And that's our friend David saying, wow, that's cool. And yeah, as you can see, it's a greater spotted eagle, and it's almost exactly right above us.
Yeah.
Here's an example of when we get tipped off. This is a short-toed snake eagle that was found, I can't remember if it was at the Falsterbo Canal or at Union. They called us, we got ready, and as you can see in the film, yeah, gets called out. Are you ready for the snake eagle? First it calls out in Swedish, then it gets called out in Danish. Sometimes we need to call it out in English and Dutch as well. And you see, this bird is heading towards us. We knew this was coming. We found it when it was over the village, and it just passed right over our heads. Absolutely amazing experience. I'm going to skip through these videos because you can watch them afterwards. They're all on YouTube. Important, when you've seen some good birds, you have to celebrate your great successes, preferably with some non-alcoholic or alcoholic sparkling wine, depending on your flavor. Very important. Let's go to the next one. Next set of species, these are the fast harriers, or raptors, or the small raptors, and the strategy is completely different. Sure, they can pop up and be detected at Ljungen, but most of the time when they call us and they say, oh, we have a red-footed falcon heading southwest, not so high, heading straight towards you guys. Okay, great, and we start looking for it, can't find it. It's just gone. It's just in thin air, it just disappears. And if that is because it's too small of a target that passes quickly, or if it changes direction, or I wish I knew. But it's very rare that the prior information is helpful with these species. So we have to rely on ourselves to find them, and flank monitoring is the key. The 90% of these birds we find at a low vertical angle on the sides, either going out over the sea or already out over the sea. That goes for the falcons and the harriers, for most of them, of course. Sometimes there is something coming straight in the airspace, but almost always we find them on the sides. And these are more challenging than the soaring raptors because they pass really quickly. The ID will be made harder because of the distance and the lack of time that we have. So it's really important to get some film and photos of these birds. Even if we're pretty sure that, okay, that is a Montagu's harrier, we almost always make sure to get film or photos of it to verify afterwards, was it a Montagu's or was it a pallid? Because those are two of the species where you can most efficiently measure the population changes with the counting in Falsterbo. But it relies on the people counting knowing how to identify these species. And that's not trivial. So documenting this, even if it's sub-rarity level, super important. Let me give you a couple of examples. This is a gyrfalcon that we actually got a heads up on from Ljungen. And we probably would have from the lighthouse. And it's obviously a gyrfalcon, as you can see. No questions asked.
Gyrfalcon.
Yeah, you see, I call it out there, completely sure. It's a gyrfalcon. That's a gull. Just typical falcon migration. It just it breaks for nobody. Just keeps going. So how did we know it was a gyrfalcon? As I said, the lighthouse people, they found it and they called us and said, there is a gyrfalcon heading out over sea north of us. You should probably be able to see it, but not see that it's a gyrfalcon, which, yeah, that's pretty correct. This example is of a pallid harrier, and it just goes to show how fast you have to be sometimes. From the time that this bird was found to that it was so far out over the sea that you could practically, you could maybe still see that it was a pallid, but it wasn't a very enjoyable observation. It's less than a minute. It just popped into the field of view, you hurry to get some documentation of it, and then it just continues out. 10 meters per second headwind, it doesn't care. It's not even a problem. Heading towards Denmark, never to be seen again. Those moments are incredible. So we have to celebrate them. All right. Next group of species. I'm quite liberal with my definition here of seabirds, It's not only gannets and boobies and shearwaters, petrels, this kind of stuff. I'm talking about anything you can find over the sea. So any lure, divers, any ducks, really anything that we find over the sea. How do we pick out the rare birds? Well, obviously, we have to monitor the flanks. The seabirds, if we define them as flying over the sea, well, then you have to look over the sea to find them. That part's pretty obvious. We talk a lot at Nabben about a concept that you can call it flock trawling. So this is basically the activity of looking at every bird in the flock. There's really no shortcuts here. Like, if there's a flock of barnacle geese, if you want to find the red-breasted goose, it's not just going to stand out. You're going to have to look through them to see, oh, there is the red-breasted goose. If this is because of the human brain interpolating patterns to a too high degree for us to be optimal birders, I don't know. But I'm sure you have recognized a situation where you're looking at a flock and it looks like, yeah, that's a flock of eiders, and then suddenly there is a Steller's eider or a king eider in the flock, and you're like, where did it come from? So flock trawling, that's important. On this topic, I would also stress the fact that you should look through the entire flock. If you look at a flock of eiders, and then there's a leucistic female or something, and you're like, oh yeah, that's nice, it's a cream-colored eider or whatever. Don't stop at that. Don't stop at the first red-breasted goose that you find in the barnacle flock. Keep scanning through it. There are a number of examples where you realize a little bit after you found the first red-breasted geese, oh, there's actually two more. Or, hey, there's actually a king eider in this flock together with the widgeon or whatever that was flying there. So there's no secret, just power through the flocks and have stamina. We never get tipped off on this, or more or less never. Sometimes there's bird alerts from the various coasts, but they but rarely materialize in an actual sighting in Falsterbo. So there could be a Sabines gull heading down along the west coast of Sweden, and it somehow misses Falsterbo. Sometimes they might show up, but no, it's not reliable. Also be ready for them at any time of day. We've had good seabirds before first light. We had the first record of shag 1 minute before we're forced to end migration counting at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. At 14:59, literally, there is a shag flying by, and it's the first record ever for Falsterbo. I will show that in just a second here. Filming, I would say, is the key documentation here. Photography is also great. And the reason is flocks of many birds, they permutate all the time. The flock shape and composition, it shifts continuously, and it can be hard to know where is the bird that I need to photograph in the flock. Where is it? And to see that in a camera viewfinder can be hard. I will show you a film example of a black-bellied brent that I did not spot live in the field. I was looking at the flock through the BTX, filming through one opening and looking in the other, and I could not spot it, but it's on the film, so it was in my eyesight. I just couldn't pick it out. Here it is. This is you can try and pick it out, and if you manage, I'm going to be impressed. There will be an arrow that shows which bird we're interested in here. Here are the brents. Obviously, there it is. Easy as cake. And as you notice, the bird flies out of my filming because I don't see it. So I'm like, where should I film? So I was just trying to cover the whole flocks and see if I got it. And yeah, I did, but it was a close call. Here's the shag. I think you will be able to tell that it's a shag when I start the film here. Shag! Yeah, I guess that was pretty clear.
Ensam toppskarv, ung toppskarv. Helvete! Ung toppskarv är det.
Those are as Swedish cuss words.
Move!
People coming in the way.
Ger rätt snabba vingslag.
More people in the way. Yeah, you can translate those words as, wow, that's cool. Here is an example. This is probably the most famous moment in recent times at Nabben. This is the third record in Sweden of brown booby. It's the first bird out of these three that is actually seen from land. There was one bird found on the ferry between Finland and Sweden. They put it in a paper box and then showed it in the harbor. There was one bird that landed on a boat off the west coast of Sweden. And then one morning at Nabben, my good friend Thomas Svensson, he calls out, here's a gannet, a really dark one. And I'm like, a dark, yeah, that must mean it's juvenile. I haven't seen that in a long time. So I take a quick peek at it. And I'm like, what? Is this how a gannet looks like? And I say something along the lines like, that's not a gannet, it's a shearwater or something. And I take up the phone and start filming it. So this whole film has the process of identifying the bird in it. Unfortunately, most of it is Swedish. There is a couple of Dutch comments, and there is an American friend of mine who runs up and asks, is that a booby, Måns? Because, I mean, he doesn't know that a booby would be a sensational find in Sweden. And we say something along the lines, yeah, we think so. When you look at the film, it's clearly a brown booby. There's like no doubt what species this is. But in the moment, this shows it. There can be such unexpected things that you always have to be ready to document them and just make sure that you can tell what it is afterwards and not just rely on memory or something like that. I will just show the beginnings here, and you can take a look at YouTube later on.
Den är förbi bruna skylten, den är över bruna skylten nu. Nu går den lite höger. Nu syns den inte, nu syns den. Över horisont höger om bruna skylten. Kommer närmare, under horisont. Över.
At this point we don't know what it is. We're maybe starting to
suspect
something.
Skylten lågt.
But I'm just telling people, where is it? Where should you look?
Den är förbi bruna skylten lågt.
Yeah. And interestingly enough, I keep saying it's past the brown sign. This brown bird and the brown sign, they went very well together. Of course, remember to celebrate. Shout outs to my good friend Pete and to Leo and to Harry and Dirk and Steven and Gideon and Adri and all my Dutch friends who come and bird with me there. This, I believe, is the day after the brown booby. We, of course, had some chocolate cake the evening of the bird. But this is the next day. That's worthy of a celebration. Now let's switch to waders. And this is a little bit of a shorter section. I don't have so many examples, but it's a very interesting group of species, especially here at Nabben. The one thing I would stress when it comes to finding rare waders is to learn their calls. It's surprisingly useful. We find many dotterels. We found pectoral sandpipers. We found a Baird sandpiper, broadbill sandpipers. We found them all on the call. So, of course, learn all the common species, their calls, and then learn all the rare species and their calls, because they help a lot. Every year we find a good wader on the call, and that's really not to be underestimated. Aside from the calls, not many waders are we actually found on migration. It's happens like some Terex sandpiper and some buff-breasted sandpiper. But most of them we find when they're on stopover on the shores around Nabben. So you have to regularly scan. There is a constant turnover of waders. I'm sure you know what it's like. There's a flock, and you think it's the same flock that's there all the time, but really there is probably the double amount of the waders in the vicinity, at least if the area is large enough, and they're constantly changing out which are where. So always scan through them regularly. Don't assume that I've already checked the waders. Check them again. And never leave a lone wader unidentified. This especially applies to Nabben when a lone wader is flying by. don't leave it unidentified. That's very often where we find the rare waders. It's not that most lone waders are rare, it's that you find them when you check the lone waders. Grey phalaropes, dotterels again, pectoral and buff-breasted sandpipers. Most of the time you find them alone. And just to mention the potential for waders at this potential location, we had 29 wader species in one morning in 2022. That's the Swedish record, and I don't ever think it's going to be beaten because it's such an absurd number of wader species in one location up far in the north. So one of my favorite days that I've ever had at Nabben. Here's an example of a Tibetan sandplover. If you remember the wolf that I found on the morning after Midsummer's Eve, my friend Bengt, who also lives in Falsterbo, came to Nabben an hour and a half after I'd had the wolf, which was at 4:40 in the morning or something. And he missed the alert that I sent out. And he was like, "What? You had a wolf? Oh no," and was like devastated and taken, completely shocked. 2 hours later, he calls out that there is a sandpiper with a red breast on the sand. And I'm like, well, that can only mean that it's a good bird. Turns out it's a Tibetan sandplover. This took us an hour at least before we could nail down the identification. I don't remember all the English names, but there is a split. So you have at least 3 species that look quite similar. Tibetan, I don't know if it's called Kamchatkan sandpiper or something, that's the Swedish name. But which one was it? It was far away, hard to identify. In this film, you will hear there's a bunch of phones going off and discussions because we're in the process of identifying the bird. Yeah, discussing where we can rule out that species. Somebody's calling, they've checked pictures we've sent. Oh, it's flying, will we ever see it again? High stakes situation. And this is the guy who found the bird, and he knows the drill by now. But you would also think that he knows how to aim his champagne bottle, given that it was not the first time he found a good wader. But he damn nearly destroyed our windbreak when he fired it. Let's go to the next one. So that's the waders, very exciting group of species. And let's get into the most numerous group of species, meaning this is the most species are passerines, and most of the birds that we see are passerines. How do we do to find these? How do we pick out the good birds when there is hundreds of thousands of passerines migrating in a day? You've guessed it, calls are key. That's why I emphasize noise discipline so much before. You have to have the opportunity to hear as much as possible in order to pick out all the good buntings, pipits, some of the larks, and anything else that will be damn near impossible to tell apart from the others if you don't hear it. Yeah, I get ahead of myself because I'm so passionate about keeping the noise down. It must be minimized. We've missed birds because people have been talking or scraping their feet and stuff like that. Rarely it happens that they call from the lighthouse and say, "Hey guys, this just passed. Keep your ears and eyes open." That's a great, we should use that actually. We should tell people that they called from the lighthouse and had something good just to quiet everybody down, even if they didn't. But no, that probably backfire in the end. And you should remember that you can actually find these birds on the gis as well. I will show an example of where we find a Richard's pipit on the gis when we actually were tipped off from the lighthouse. I found a crested lark on the gis one time. Matthias has found little buntings on the gis, and so has other people. Don't underestimate it. Don't leave that's a weird, that's reed bunting looks a little bit smaller. Like, don't leave that. Attack it. Film it, photograph it, check if it lands somewhere. It's not only sound, although sound is the most important. And I can't stress that enough either. Keep audio recordings, generally, of course, if you're at migration hotspots, but this is where we have room for improvement so that we can get more of the passerines documented properly. So let's take a look at the Richards pipit. They called from the lighthouse saying there's a Richards pipit heading south. Everybody quiets down. I start the recording on my phone. We start looking for it. And that was the Richards pipit.
Vad är det som kommer här uppe?
Yeah. And that's when I say, what's coming up here? I didn't hear the call in the feed. And somebody calls out Richards pipit. Yeah, that was me. But I could find on the recording that it did call 2 times. And you can actually hear in the recording also Nils, the migration counter emeritus, that he actually heard the call. And so did Björn. But we thought it was the tree sparrows hanging out that were making noise. I'll just pause this here. Here is the bird. So from the start of the video, there is an audio recording. And then when I start the video recording, it stops the audio recording automatically. So this is like from the moment we found it to I get it in the get film on it. So we could have found it on the ear, but nobody called it out when it was calling until I called it out when I saw it. And I mean, Richards pipit is a fairly typical gis. It's a bit harder with an olive back pipit, for example. A bit. Let's go to the next one. This is something you don't find on the call. This is our favorite buddy from the forests of Sweden. Some people call them the clown of the bird world. I think that they're pretty funny, but I wouldn't go so far as calling them clowns. Always nice when you get a good nutcracker year and they're flying around trying to find a forest on the other side of the sea before they go out. But most of the time they just go back inside where they're safe in the inland. And finally, let me give an example of the perhaps best atmosphere we've had after finding a rare bird. This is a red-rumped swallow. Oh, no. In October. Nobody's ever had a red-rumped swallow in October in Sweden. And you can probably hear how happy the more experienced guys are and my words of, wow, that's cool, when you just listen to this.
Roskumsvala rakt upp. Helvete! Dokumentera det för helvete!
And there it is. Fantastic bird. Fantastic find. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you. Thank you very much for a really cool story. We still have some time for any questions. So if there's anyone who has a question about counting tactics, finding the rare ones. Not even the smart guys over here? No? Well, then I'll have one. For example, when you have a lot of blue sky, we call it the blue soup in the Netherlands. What kind of scanning tactics do you guys have for just, keep yourself watching the blue soup?
My personal tactics are sweeping. Basically, I will use my binoculars and I will sweep the sky. I will go in a zigzag pattern and try and cover the whole sky. When there are blue skies, I spend more time just looking straight up than I would do on another day. But those are like I still use the zigzag tactics when it's not a blue sky day. But I might not be as I will focus more on the distant birds over the land or something like that. So zigzag pattern and looking more straight up. That's the main adaptations to that situation.
Cool. Nice. Thanks. I hear a question somewhere.
And while you walk over there, if you scan these with your phone, you get links to the documentary I talked about, the Bird Observatory's webpage. Without the Bird Observatory, I wouldn't be here today. We wouldn't have this counting and everything. So if you're interested, you can take a look.
Thank you for your tips. My question, do you have a bottle of champagne every day? Do you take it every day with you?
I should, right? No, I don't.
It seems so. It seems so.
It seems like we're completely alcoholics, all of us. I've collected these pictures over many years.
Okay.
And they are. It happens one or maybe twice per season.
Okay, I thought
we actually go so far to celebrate something. I just wanted to make a fun little gag out of it here at the presentation. But
okay, thank you.
Nice.
Yes. Why is there only still like half of the gravel covered with the mats? Why didn't you cover it all?
Why is there only half of the
of the gravel?
Gravel is covered with mats. Because now it still doesn't work, right?
Well, you can fortunately move the mats. So the explanation is we ran out of mats. If we could, we would probably buy some oil platform somewhere, pump out all of the oil, make mats out of all of it, and cover everything within a square kilometer radius or a kilometer radius. No, we would like to cover more of it, but we don't have enough mats. So we still have to rely on people being far away enough for it to not be too annoying. They still help a lot, the mats we have.
Perfect.
Is it covered in gravel?
The reason it's covered in gravel is, so if you go back in time, there was no windbreak out there, and everything was sand and grass, and you used to hide behind a bush on the neighboring golf course, but that was not anybody's ideal solution. So eventually we managed to source funding. It was the golf club, the local municipality, and the Swedish Environmental Protection Agency. They joined forces and built this windbreak. And in conjunction with that, they built a gravel path out to the windbreak from the lighthouse. And nobody really foresaw this unfortunate consequence of the gravel used. But we have managed it by now.
Perfect. Thanks for your elaboration on the gravel and your whole story, of course.
Thank
you. For anyone who wants to do a donation for rubber mats or just for funding, as there is no veld shop in Sweden, we will do a donation as well from Dutch Birding for your talk. Om 3:30 komt Wim Wiegand weer eigenlijk het jaar of de dag afsluiten met een jaaroverzicht van vorig jaar. Mag ik nog één daverend applaus voor Måns alsjeblieft.